Okay, here's a question. Have you ever heard from God and he says, hey, go here, go there, give this, say that, and you thought, nah, I'm not doing that. Has that ever happened to you? Yeah, me too. Several years ago, I was starting out with my new business, and I was going into the local bank down by where I lived in Sorby Bridge. I walked through the door and I turned round to the cashier. Excuse me, are you closing down? And she goes, no, who's told you that? Well, what had happened is, as I was walking through the entrance, God spoke to me and says, this place is closing down. So it's only right I asked the question. As I'm stood there, there's a window by the side of me, and I'm looking out the window. Now, a friend of mine had set up a business right across the street, and I get this composure to go in and see him. So I walks over to the other side of the road and goes into the building. And as I walks through the door, I sees my mate David sat there talking to another friend of his. After about 5 or 10 minutes, I grabs himself a cup of coffee, and he comes over and joins me. So we're having a little bit of a conversation about how things are going and this, that and the other. So as time was progressing, I'd asked him a question how business were going, because it had only been open about 3 months. So he was telling me business was slow, things could be doing a lot better. But, he knew that God had told him to go down this avenue. Well, as we're kind of like in this conversation of how much we're doing and how business is, he ends up opening up the till and there's nothing inside it. So as I'm kind of like looking round, I'm hearing from God, write him a cheque out for £500. Well, I turns round and I says, oh, not a lot in there. I said, maybe I should give you some money. And he says, we'll be all right. And he was like that. So I kind of hesitated by delaying this cheque for 500 quid. To the point where I thought, nah, he don't need it. I need it more than what he does. So I kept hold of it. So as the weeks and months progressed, David decided he was going to enter into the Yorkshire Enterprise Awards. I think that was the name. It was something like that. Well, this was going to be shown on ITV, and the winner won £50,000. Well, David was known well and truly throughout the church community across Halifax. And he came up to our local church to tell everybody about what was going on and what he was going to be applying for. But I knew that I was supposed to partner with him and write him a cheque out for £500. But I held back. You see, what happens is this. Sometimes you think you've heard from God, but then again, sometimes it's probably the cheese, the chocolate, the amount of pizzas you've had, which could be sending your mind all over the place. But if you're not going to do whatever it is that your intuition tells you to do, you ain't going to reap the benefits. So several months had gone by and the awards came into play, and he won first place and £50,000. I was kind of like studying my church as he made this announcement, because he was going around certain churches across Halifax. And I was stood there behind the PA desk thinking, I was supposed to partner with this guy, but I chose not to. You see, many years before, I had an encounter with God, and he turned around to me and says, take the money out of your briefcase that you've been saving up and give it to this woman. Well, God was showing me who this woman was in the church that I'd never met. And that morning, I arrived at the church with £500 in my pocket, gave that woman £500 that I'd never met, who turned up to the church for the very first time, which opened up a door to meet David. See, David's the type of guy who is a very humble guy. He gives everything out. If he can help you, he will. He understands the struggles of life, but he also understands how to hear God. And people like that really influence me to continue in my journey through life. You see, I might have missed out on the benefits of him winning, but I knew God spoke to me, because 2 weeks later I got a letter from the bank saying the bank was closing early next year, which told me I heard very, very clear, but I just ignored it. Not the wisest move, is it? I'm Alistair, and this is my podcast.